Good evening, everybody, and welcome to session 2 of the One Life course live. It's great that you could be with us here tonight. This is session 2. We started the One Life course live last week, and if you tuned in, I hope that was a great introduction for you, and you're looking forward to tonight's session as well. As I mentioned last week, the overall aim of this course is to explore what I believe is the best news ever. So I hope that's what you're looking forward to tonight. Welcome again. My name is Mike Smith. I'm the Senior Minister of Minchinbury Anglican Church, a church that exists to love Jesus and to show Jesus love. And as I mentioned last week, one of the best parts of my job is I get to talk to people and introduce them to Jesus, who I think is the best person that anybody could get to know. And the reason for this course is to introduce people to Jesus. So over the next few Monday nights, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to explore together the best news ever that Jesus can bring. Each session, there'll be some content that I'll be delivering, and then there'll be also an opportunity for you to ask any questions about the things that we talk about each Monday night, or about anything to do with life, faith, meaning, God, Bible, the universe, anything that you would like to know about. So thanks so much for tuning in. I can see Bruce is here this evening, and Bruce says hello to everybody. Hello to you, Bruce, as well. If you are here for the first time, why don't you let us know in the comments? Hit the like button. Write in the comments, I'm new. It'd be great to engage with you tonight. And if you're a member of our church here at Minchinbury, thanks so much for tuning in tonight as well. Feel free to share this video live now with your family and friends so that they can engage with us tonight as well. Now, as I mentioned, there are a time each session to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. And there are a couple of questions that came out of last week's session. 2 questions that I want to address later tonight, not straight away. You have to wait and be patient and bear with me. 2 questions that I want to answer later tonight, flowing out of last week's session. And that is, how do you really know that God exists? And a subset of that same question is, which God, if there is a God that exists, how do you know which God it is? The world is very religious and very spiritual. How do you know which God exists? So that's the first question. The second question is, how do I believe the Bible when it talks about miraculous events? How can you believe in miracles? Hasn't science disproven the idea of miracles? We're going to look at that question later in our time together tonight. But if you have any other questions about life, faith, meaning, Bible, God, the universe, make sure that you put those in the comments there below. Hello to Craig. It's great to see you here tonight. Welcome along. I hope that tonight is encouraging for you. And as I said, keep sharing this video with your friends and family so they have an opportunity to hear what I think is the best news ever. But let's jump straight into our content for tonight. A number of years ago, Pepsi, the great company Pepsi, made a series of commercials with an elderly character named Uncle Drew. The context of the ad was a street basketball court with some young blood, according to Uncle Drew, and he challenged them to a game of basketball. Now, Uncle Drew joins the game, and he initially just fumbles the ball all over the place and shoots and completely misses the backboard even at times. A few minutes later, though, Uncle Drew actually starts to play some significantly good basketball. He starts out-dribbling all the young blood. He starts even outpacing them, and even at points he would slam dunk over the top of them, and the young basketballers like, what is going on? This old guy who was just a moment ago, not playing very well, is now playing this amazing basketball. And as the ad progresses, you soon see that Uncle Drew, this old guy, is actually an NBA All-Star, Gary Irvin, dressed up in disguise, and the young basketballers on the street did not even recognise him. I don't know if you've ever bumped into somebody famous before and you completely missed it. Why don't you let us know in the comments there below if you've ever mistaken somebody for another person, or you bumped into a celebrity and you didn't even know it. People have different reactions, don't they, when they meet someone famous? Some people, recognise them straight away and go all crazy and, say all kind of different things. And other people just close up. They don't know what to do. They're in absolute shock that they have crossed paths with someone famous. Today, I want us to look at the identity of the person I believe is at the centre of the universe. Not just a celebrity, but the most important person in all of world history, and that is the person of Jesus, as we see him in the Bible. Last week, you might remember that we were introduced to the person of Jesus from one of his biographers, a guy by the name of Mark, who was following one of Jesus' closest friends, the Apostle Peter. And you might remember that this is what Mark said about Jesus right at the very beginning of his biography. He said this: "The beginning of the good news about Jesus Christ, the Son of God." Mark tells us right up front who he believes Jesus is: the Christ, the Son of God. And as I mentioned last week, Christ is not Jesus' surname. Christ is Jesus' title, which means God's only chosen king, or God's representative on earth. This is not just a celebrity. This is not just a ruler or a king. This is the King of Kings. This is God himself come to earth. And I want to show you tonight an episode in Mark's biography of Jesus which shows us with no shadow of a doubt that Jesus really is the Christ, God's representative on earth. It's a famous story, and you may have seen it or read it or heard it before. It's a story where Jesus calms a storm. It's a fantastic story. I'm going to put the words up there on the screen, encourage you to read it with me and to just enjoy this story. And the story comes at the end of a long day where Jesus has been sitting on a boat, and there have been crowds of people sitting on the sand on the beach listening to Jesus teach about the kingdom of God. And some people didn't understand it and they're confused. But anyway, it gets to the end of the day and Jesus decides he wants to take the boat and go over to the other side of the lake. And this is what happens. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. "That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him." Now, the disciples of Jesus have been listening to Jesus teach about the kingdom of God. And as I said, a lot of them didn't understand what he was talking about. But when Jesus says now, "Hey guys, I want to go over to the other side of the lake," they know exactly what Jesus is talking about. Remember, Jesus' disciples at this stage, many of them were fishermen, many of them were sailors. They knew lots about lakes and they knew lots about boats. And can you see how active the disciples are in these two verses and how passive Jesus is? The disciples know what to do. They think that they're in control, and so they take him along. They take Jesus and they put him in the back of the boat and they're like, "Jesus, we've got this. We're fishermen, we're sailors, we know how to get to the other side of the lake. You just have a nap down there at the back. It's been a long day teaching. We'll look after you." Now, keeping Jesus as a passenger in the boat might be all good and well until things in life don't go according to plan. Let's keep reading and see what happens. "A furious squall came up." A squall is like a big storm, like a gale force storm. "And the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped." Now, the disciples are professional sailors. They've been through many storms on the Lake of Galilee before. They knew how to handle boats and knew how to handle the wind and the waves. But this wasn't a small storm. See those words there? This was a furious squall. This was like a cyclone almost. It's that incredible. And they couldn't save themselves. They were scared. As we keep reading, we see that Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" There's a great contrast here, isn't there? There's all this noise and chaos surrounding the boat, the wind and the waves and the water sloshing all over the boat. The disciples, no doubt, screaming and yelling out, "What is going on?" And there's Jesus, just sleeping away in the stern at the boat. Before I was married, I used to live in a flat in Western Sydney with my brother. And I remember one morning I woke up and I went into the lounge room just in my pyjamas as I would normally do. And there I discovered that there was two policemen talking to my younger brother. And my first response was, uh-oh, what have you done? And maybe that would have been your response as well. But a moment later, the police turned to me and they said, okay, now it's your turn. We want your statement. I said, statement? What do you mean statement? Apparently, during the night, our next door neighbour, the flat next door, of which my bedroom was the common wall, there was a major domestic dispute, and my brother heard it and called the police, and they came and they sorted it out, and the police were getting his statement. And then they asked for mine. But I slept through the entire event. I didn't hear a word, so there was nothing that I could do. The disciples in this story are full of panic. They are restless, but Jesus is peaceful and he is resting here in the boat. Now, I used to think that at this point, when the disciples wake Jesus up and say, do something, that they were asking Jesus to do a miracle. But I don't think that's exactly what they are doing. Notice again how they address Jesus. They call him teacher. And they say, teacher, don't you care? Now, they don't call Jesus Lord or God. They call him teacher. What good is a teacher? In the middle of this furious storm, the teacher might be able to tell them about barometric pressure and how the wind and the waves are working in a storm, but he can't do much about the storm, let alone stop it. And they say, teacher, don't you care? What they're more interested in is, Jesus, how can you sleep during a storm like this? Wake up, we're all in the same boat, we're all about to die. Come and face it with us. What bugs them is that Jesus doesn't seem to be worried. He doesn't seem to care. Now, if I was Jesus at this point, I might be a little sarcastic and say, but I thought you guys were professional sailors. I thought you knew everything about boats. But Jesus doesn't do that. He's much more gracious than I am. Listen to how Jesus responds. He got up, rebuked the wind and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Quiet, be still. The teacher speaks and lectures to nature, to the environment, to the wind and the waves. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever tried this. Next time there is a big storm, go out on the Manly Ferry. I know you probably can't do that at the moment with Sydney being in lockdown, but when we come out of lockdown, go on the Manly Ferry across Sydney Harbour during a storm and go to the front of the boat and just say, quiet, be still, and see what happens. My guess is not much will happen. Maybe some people will come up and try and say, look, come and get down, thinking there's something wrong with you. And normally it takes hours after a storm before the water starts to settle down. We know that's true, but look at what happens in this story. After Jesus says, quiet, be still, we see the wind died down and it was completely calm. Jesus just calms the storm instantly, just with his voice. He doesn't pray to God and ask God to do a miracle. He just speaks on his own authority. The wind and the waves listen, and then they are completely calm. Not even a ripple on the surface of the water. This is incredible what Jesus does. And then after speaking to the wind and the waves, he turns to his disciples and he speaks to them. Listen to what he says. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Do you notice everything is calm now except for the disciples? They are still scared. They are still afraid. Why? Why are they afraid when the storm is now gone? Jesus has rescued them. Why are they still so afraid? Well, it's because they've just realised the guy that they told to have a sleep in the back of the boat, that they were in control of everything, has stood up and he can speak to the storm and the storm listens. And they're like, "Who is this guy? This isn't just a teacher. and we put him in the back of the boat? And they're starting to think about how significant he is. Who is this man? Now, if they had known their Bibles, the disciples should have known this was God himself in a boat with people. I've got this passage from Psalm 107, verse 23 to 31, which was written hundreds and hundreds of years before Mark wrote his biography of Jesus, hundreds of years before Jesus even sat in that boat on the Lake of Galilee. And the disciples should have known this psalm. They would have been taught it as a kid. They would have sung it in their Sunday school classes if they had Sunday school classes. Listen to it and notice the similarity between the psalm and the calming of the storm in Mark. Others went to sea in ships, conducting trade on the vast waters. They saw the Lord's works, his wonderful works in the deep. He spoke and raised a tempest that stirred up the waves of the sea, rising up to the sky, sinking down to the depths, their courage melting away in anguish. They reeled and staggered like drunken men, and all their skill was useless. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a murmur, and the waves of the sea were hushed. They rejoiced when the waves grew quiet. Then he guided them to the harbour they longed for. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his faithful love, his wonderful works for all humanity. Did you notice the similarities between the psalm and the gospel? There's a boat, there's a storm at the sea, there's the helplessness and the fear of the sailors. They staggered around like drunken men, and then there is the stilling of the storm. But did you notice there was a difference between the psalm and Jesus calming the storm in Mark? Did you notice the difference? The difference was at the end, the sailors gave thanks to the Lord for guiding them out of the storm and to the harbour that they longed for. But in Mark, the disciples aren't rejoicing. The disciples are scared. Why? Because maybe, just maybe, they've just realised that the person they had put in the back of the boat thinking he was just a man actually is God with them. And so they ask, who is this? That he acts with God's authority in God's world. You know, it's one thing growing up singing songs about God calming the storm at the sea. It's a whole nother thing altogether to experience it yourself personally. And so the disciples ask, who is this man? And that question is really a question that Mark invites us to consider for ourselves. Who do we think Jesus is? What is his identity? What place does he have in our lives? And so I've got this question up on the screen, and I'd love you to share your response there in the comments below. If your life was a boat out on the lake, where would Jesus be in your boat? Would he be swimming? He's not even in your boat. Would he be sleeping at the back? Or would he be sailing your boat? Jesus might not even be in your boat. He might be swimming. You might think that Jesus has no relevance for your life, and so he's nowhere near your boat. And you're quite happy for him to have no influence over your life whatsoever. If that's the case, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. I'd love for you to engage with me. Ask a few questions there in the comments below, and I'd love to help you think through who Jesus really is. So Jesus might be swimming. He's not in your boat. Jesus might be in your boat, but he might be just sleeping at the back. You're happy for Jesus to be in your life, and you're happy for him to be a teacher. You're happy for him to, talk about heaven and talk about loving your neighbour and loving your enemy and love. We all like that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of life, you're happy to be the sailor of your boat. You're happy to make the decisions. Yeah, you can call upon Jesus if you need him, but you're more than happy to be in control of your own boat, your own life. And that could be you, that you could have Jesus just sleeping there at the back. Or you could have Jesus sailing your boat. It's one thing to have Jesus swimming or Jesus sleeping when life is going well. But when the storms of life come, you start to see the inadequacy of not having Jesus in your life. how do we not know at the moment with this coronavirus, COVID-19, wreaking havoc across our planet for the last 18 months, causing my own city here, Sydney, to be in lockdown again? We just see so clearly that life is fragile, that life is short, that we are not in control. As smart as we are, as wealthy as we are, we can't stop this virus, it seems, from spreading across our globe. And if Jesus is sleeping or swimming, there is no hope there for us. But if Jesus is sailing, then we have God himself guiding us through life, and he will bring us to the harbour that we truly long for, which is the best news ever. So, where is Jesus in your boat? Is Jesus swimming? Is Jesus sleeping? Or is Jesus sailing? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? And as I said, each and every session, having delivered the content and the content is now delivered, I want to give you an opportunity to engage with it, to ask any questions, not just about the story from the Bible, but about anything to do with God, life, the Bible, the universe. So why don't you let us know there in the comments below if there's any questions that you have. I'll give you just a moment there to share if there is any questions. If not, that's okay. And if you're watching this on the rebroadcast, still put a question there in the comments, because I'll read them during the week, and next Monday night I'd love to do my best to answer your question as well. So what questions do you have about Jesus, about his identity? Who have you thought that he is? Have you believed he's just a teacher, a man, or do you believe that he really is God's representative on earth? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, keep putting your questions there if they're through. Let me just go through some of the questions that I wanted to talk about tonight. And if you've been waiting patiently tonight for these answers, then thanks so much for being patient. 2 questions that I wanted to answer tonight. How do you know that God really exists? How do you know? How do you know that God really exists? Well, there are many different scientific and philosophical arguments for and against the existence of God. Maybe you've heard some of them. Maybe you found some of them persuasive. Why don't you let us know in the comments below? If you believe in God, why do you believe in God? Or if you don't yet believe in God, why not? What is it that's convinced you that God isn't real? Well, as I said last week, I think the existence of God makes the best sense of the reality that we live in. And I encourage you to go back and listen to session 1, where I outlined some of the reasons why I think the existence of God makes best sense. But as I said last week, the one piece of evidence, in addition to the scientific arguments, in addition to the philosophical and the moral arguments, the one piece of evidence that's convinced me above every other argument that God exists is the person of Jesus. Because Jesus says, "Here I am. I am God's representative on earth. I am the Son of God." And as we've seen in Mark chapter 4, Jesus acts in the world with God's authority. It was God who calmed the storm in the psalm, and it's Jesus doing the exact same thing in the New Testament, in Mark's gospel. Jesus is God. That is his identity. Jesus is God. And if that is true, and I'm thoroughly convinced it is, the more I've read about Jesus, the more I have read his stories and what he said and what he did, the more I'm convinced that Jesus is amazing. And if what he did is true, then his identity is true. He is God. And therefore, God is real and God exists. Now, if Jesus is God, that then answers a subsequent question. What about other gods? What about other religions that have a different understanding of God? Well, if Jesus is God, then by definition, other gods can't be God, unless you have this idea that there are many different gods. But if there is an all-powerful, all-knowing deity in control of all things, you can only have one at that point. And so if Jesus is God, then the other world religions, no matter what good things they might have in them, they're not true. that only Jesus is the true and living God. Well, I believe that, and maybe you're not quite there yet. And so how do you know? Well, the best thing to do is just to do some research, to do what we're doing tonight and over the next few Monday nights, to come and explore. I'm trying to persuade you, hopefully gently and but winsomely, that Jesus really is God, and that makes a whole lot of difference to your life. But there are other claims about God, and you need to investigate some of them as well. And I hope that you come to the conclusion, as I have, that Jesus really is the true and living God. How do you know that God exists? Now, let me just quickly go through, see if there's any other questions there. I can't see any there, but that's okay. Keep thinking, keep exploring with me. The next question that I wanted to talk through tonight is about miracles. How can you believe in miracles? And our story tonight, where Jesus calms a raging storm just with the words of his mouth, is a miracle. As I said, if you try and do that in top of the Manly Ferry, nothing's going to happen. People might just come and take you away and put you in hospital somewhere. It's a miracle what Jesus does. But did it actually happen? Is it just a fairy tale? Do miracles happen? Well, almost all major historians agree that Jesus did things that were incredible, that nobody else could do. Even an ancient historian that lived just after Jesus, a Jewish historian who wasn't a Christian, his name was Josephus, he talked about Jesus, his life and ministry and what he did, and he talked about Jesus being able to do miraculous works or wondrous deeds. Even historians agree that Jesus was known to be doing some crazy things. All the biographies of Jesus talk about his miracles. Now, I guess your fundamental base belief about whether God exists also shapes your initial answer to this question. If you don't believe that God exists, then of course it makes sense that miracles can't happen. But if you have this base belief that God is real, that the supernatural exists, then it's not outside the realm of possibility for there to be miracles, for there to be supernatural events, for there to be things that can't be explained by normal, naturalistic means. I think it's good to be skeptical about claims of miracles, specifically miracles now, but also miracles that happened in the ancient past. But I don't think it's right just to dismiss miraculous claims because it's outside my normal experience. I think it's more appropriate to explore it, to ask questions. That's what a skeptic does. A skeptic hears about something and goes, could that really have happened? And they investigate it for themselves. And so when it comes to particularly the miracles of Jesus, the right response is not just to dismiss it because you think out of hand that it can't happen, but to explore it. What evidence is there for it? And of course, if you have this underlying assumption that the supernatural might exist, that God could be a possibility, then miracles are a possibility as well. But I think a better question to ask is, why did Jesus do miracles? Why does the Bible record some of these miraculous things that Jesus does? And he doesn't just calm a storm, he does crazy other things as well. He feeds 5,000 people with a kid's little lunch. He raises a dead girl back to life. He heals the sick just by touching people with his... Jesus does lots and lots of miracles. Why does he do them? Does he do it to kind of show off? Is it a bit of a magic trick? Why does he do it? Well, the Bible says that Jesus does these miracles to reveal who he really is. He's not just a man. He's not just a teacher. He is the Christ. He is God's representative on earth. He is God himself in human form. The miracles aren't just random acts of kindness from Jesus. He is kind and he is compassionate in what he does, but he also does them to fundamentally reveal to people who he really is, that God exists and that he is here walking with people. Now, a question that comes out of that is, if Jesus really is God, why on earth did he leave heaven and the glory of heaven and come down to this filthy planet? Why would he do that? Well, that's the question that we're going to answer next week. So make sure that you tune in next Monday night at 7:30 here on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll answer that question. Why did Jesus come? But if you've got any final questions for me tonight, please share them there in the comments below. It's great to be able to see some of you here tonight. Bruce, all the way from Dubbo. Bruce, thanks for tuning in tonight. I hope it's been helpful for you. Dubbo is a long way from Sydney, but it's great that you could be here. Debbie, thanks so much, Debbie, for tuning in. I hope that you are well, and thanks so much for listening tonight. If you've got any questions, feel free to share them there with me. Debbie says that Jesus is the Son of God. I believe that's true as well. And I think the evidence, particularly Mark chapter 4, takes us there. But what do others think? Maybe you're not quite believing in Jesus just yet, and that's okay. Keep exploring with us. Share in the comments below what you're thinking. What are your stumbling blocks to believing that Jesus is the Son of God? Well, friends, thanks so much for tuning in. I can't see any other questions there, but that's okay. Keep thinking about it during the week. If you want to leave a comment there, even after the live stream has finished, that's good too, because I'll still see them during the week. And next week, I'd love to come and answer them for you. So thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe. Look after each other. And if you're interested, you can join us next Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for our church's live stream service. God bless, friends.